Welcome to Sports Talk with Steve Jones, the daily talk show with the voice of Penn State football and men's basketball. You never know what special guest may stop on by any given day. Now here's the man of the hour, Mr. Steve Jones.
Great to be with you. And now for 49 good San Francisco seconds.
I'll tell you what. Well, they're going to get in trouble, first of all, for Christian McCaffrey. Jordan Mason let that one slip just a bit, but I thought he played real well. I thought there's no question. 49er defense played great. I was impressed. Got a long way to go, a long season, but so far so good.
You know, what's interesting about that is, and this was the same story in the Steelers game. The Steelers kicked 6 field goals, won the game 18-10. Last night, which means that, you know, the old saying we talk about all the time, it takes 3 field goals to beat a touchdown, which means you have to have 3 scoring drives to beat 1 scoring drive. Well, in the Atlanta-Pittsburgh game, the Falcons had 1 touchdown, the Steelers had none. Last night, the Jets had 3 touchdowns, and the Niners had 2 because Jake Moody kicked 6 field goals last night. My question is, overall on the league, are there too many field goals in the opening week? Field goals are fine.
Yeah, I think.
Field goals are fine. There's nothing wrong with field goals, but you want to get touchdowns.
Absolutely.
Just in the point value. You know, if you have 6 field goals and at minimum take 2 of those field goals and turn them into touchdowns, okay, now it's a little bit different ball game. And I don't think too much about it when that happens, but we're seeing a lot of field goals in the opening week of the season. We'll see in week 2 if that's different, starting with the Dolphins and the Bills, which will be on Thursday night. So, I mean, we'll see. I mean, I'm just asking the question because when you have 2 kickers kick 6 field, well, Moody kicked 6 last night, right? Right? And the same story for Boswell. Man, that's a lot of scoring drives that end before they're in the end zone.
Yeah, I think you look at it 2 ways. I think the most important part, as you said, I think you want to get it in the end zone. Absolutely. You're down the field, you're in the red zone, you want to put it away with a touchdown.
Which is why you see so many coaches go for it on 4th down.
Absolutely, no doubt. And the flip side of that being with the field goals, at least you're finishing drives.
Right.
Which I think is the other part of it where you're getting points, which I think you look back, the early part of that game, 49ers don't get anything out of that fumble, with the Breece Hall fumble.
Right.
I think you're looking at a different first half at the very least.
Sure.
There's no doubt about it. So I think getting the 3 points was huge there. But, yeah, you're absolutely right. I think you want to finish with touchdowns. And you back to the Super Bowl, same thing. The 49ers initially struggled to, well, both teams did, but 49ers struggled initially to get in the end zone and obviously came back to hurt them.
Right. Look, and that goes back to the point I made just a moment ago. Why do you see coaches going for it on 4th down? You see them going for it on 4th down because they know the value of 7, I'm tacking on the extra point, versus 3. And, there are times where you need to kick one. When Sanders Sahaydak hit a 43-yard field goal, they needed to kick a field goal there. It's just the distance was too great, and I could send him out there, and he knocked it right between the uprights. So you need an effective kicker because you're looking to get points any way you can get it. But when you're not finishing drives, that's where you feel at some point that's going to cost you. Mason, by the way, played a terrific game last night. Credit where credit is due to him. I mean, coming off the bench, playing the way he did. And as I thought it was a great interview after the game with Lisa Salters. He said, man, I looked over at Christian Christian McCaffrey. He says, how do you do this every game? Because of all the carries, the amount of punishment, things like that happen. And that was a lot of fun for him last night. Purdy played well, and the Aaron Rodgers was okay. Aaron Rodgers was okay. He wasn't great. He was okay last night.
The interception really wasn't his fault. I think that was not the best thrown ball, but that was just a bounce that went the 49ers' way. But yeah, Rodgers overall, again, I think is easing his way back in. You're 40 years old. You don't necessarily. I think people looked at him last year figuring, wow, that's miraculous to what he did with his Achilles. It was. But also when you're 40 years old, when you actually step onto the field and take that first hit, it's a lot different than when you're 23, 24 years old.
Yeah. By the way, I think they finally put out the pictures of what the new basketball court at Penn State in the Jordan Center. They have done something that I have campaigned for a long time. Okay. They put an outline of the state of Pennsylvania in the middle of the court with the Lion logo in the middle. Now, it's subtle. It's really nice. But this is the State University of Pennsylvania.
That's right.
Okay? And I have been to enough places, Illinois, Ohio State, where it's there. Right? And it's, Nebraska. There's just that little outline. And it's really well done. So to me, it's a nice look. It represents what Penn State is, the State University of Pennsylvania. So they did a really nice job with it. I really like it a lot. I wanted to see that on the court for years. Years I wanted to see that on the court. Because I've gone other places. Again, I go other places, okay? I'm not, I go other places. I see other things. Okay. Right? I mean, Indiana's always had it too. But I go other places. Like, come on. That's the State University. This is the State University. How come Penn State doesn't do it? Well, they've done it, and not only that, it looks classy, it looks nice, and it's just another aesthetic touch. So thrilled about that. Just in terms of the look, I just think it looks great. They released the body cam footage of Tyreek Hill. The whole thing is bizarre.
Completely.
It's bizarre. Okay? Now, did he make mistakes in terms of driving? I guess he was driving too fast, and I guess he was weaving because he was going in and out of traffic. Okay, I understand that. But why haul him out of the car?
That's no excuse for that.
Right?
Absolutely not.
Why?
Yeah.
Okay, over a traffic violation.
Yeah, completely. And I think as an officer in that spot, and look, I'm not a police officer, and I don't ever pretend.
They face the unknown every time.
Absolutely, 1,000%.
Yep.
That being said, well, first of all, they don't do what they do. On the flip side, to Tyreek Hill, and I'm more on Tyreek Hill's side when it comes to this here. But I think you can't roll your window up like that. Hands on the wheel, window down when you're pulled over, and there's no question you cannot do that for that exact reason. As a cop, you're facing complete unknown, and you have no idea what's going on when he rolls that window up. Yeah, so that part, Tyreek Hill screwed up on. No question. You don't make a phone call while you're getting pulled over either.
Right.
That's the other part I think he screwed up on. But on the flip side of that, they had no excuse to do it.
Right.
None.
I mean, from his point of view, I don't want to be people seeing me surrounded by the police. That's why he put the window back up. Yeah. But just do what they say because it turned out everybody then saw the next part. And he probably learned an incredible lesson about that. And he said he was opening his door and he was going to get out. Right, and then that's when they yanked him out. And it's like, okay, at that point, to me, when you do that, you've crossed a line.
Big time. Big time. Big time.
And said...
unless you have absolutely found something in that car that is endangerment to you entirely,
no.
You do not do that.
All right. And then Calais Campbell came along, who was one of the, I mean, you want to talk about one of these true citizens of the NFL Man of the Year, the whole deal, right? So he saw his teammate pulled over. He's like, what's this deal? So he went over to de-escalate the situation, and they arrested him. Like, okay, what are you doing?
That was terrible. That's just absolutely terrible.
Right.
And I think the other part of it, yeah, he was not parked in a great spot. I agree. But
right,
when you're pulled over like that with the door open, anybody that's going by is going to know, okay, something's going on.
Well, number one, any amount Calais Campbell knew that was Tyreek Hill's car.
Absolutely.
All right, like, whoa, what's that? Right. Yeah. So, of course, Hill had, of course, surgery in the off season.
Yep.
So he kept saying, hey, my knee. And the officer said, oh, really? What a coincidence. Did you have surgery in your ears when you told you to put the window down? It's like, hey, okay, at this point now you're being a jerk.
Being a jerk.
Okay?
Using your power. Yeah. And 99.9% of police officers do not do that. That's the unfortunate part of all of this. That is, they get the reputation of this person now because of what he did.
Yeah. So, police officers face the unknown every time. They have no idea what they're going to face every time.
They find somebody walking.
Right.
Same thing.
Right.
No
they don't know.
Yeah, no idea.
Okay? They don't know. So I understand that completely. And they say at one point one of the responding officers seems to acknowledge Hill's status as a professional athlete, although neither Hill nor Campbell admitted they were Dolphins players. The officer asks, you know who that is, right? One of the Dolphins' star players. Campbell is ultimately detained while one officer keeps a seated Hill in place with his hand on his shoulder. When Hill complains about being held in place, the officer forces him to the ground before allowing him to sit back up. He says, I'll tell you like this. Your job is to serve and protect, right? Hill says. You're doing a horrible job of protecting right now. I told you I'm not going to run. Says that's only going to make matters worse. And he was right about that. Hill verbally complies with the officer's orders throughout the footage. At least one officer attempts to reason with Hill and de-escalate the situation as bystanders film the incident from both the sidewalk and the vehicles. And Hill says, I'm just being a black man. That's it. He says, I'm just being black in America. And one officer says, hey, look, we're dark too, brother. He says, we're people of color too. Don't play like that's special. Okay. He's released after roughly 25 minutes when his agent, Drew Rosenhaus, arrives. The audio cuts out multiple times, but one angle Hill is heard saying to the officers, see y'all in court, before re-entering his vehicle. All right. He says, if I wasn't Tyreek Hill, Lord knows I probably would have been like in the worst case scenario. Right? And he goes through the worst case scenario. He ended up catching 7 passes for 130. So they asked him about the celebration in the end zone when he put his hands behind his back. He says, hey, you learned to have fun. I said, okay. And the team said that they were saddened by the overly aggressive and violent conduct directed toward Hill, Calais Campbell, and I guess Jonnu Smith. I didn't realize Jonnu Smith was involved.
There was two, there were 2 in the car. I didn't take notice who the other one was.
It's both maddening. Jonnu Smith was in Calais Campbell's car, or was he in Hill's car?
There was somebody else in that car that pulled in Calais' car that pulled up. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
there was somebody in the
maddening and
passenger
heartbreaking to watch the very people we trust to protect our community use such unnecessary force and hostility toward these players. It is also a reminder that not every situation like this ends in peace, and we're grateful this one did. All right. And they mentioned they're proud to have a strong relationship with the Miami-Dade Police Department. And look, they need them for security at games. I mean,
Sure,
so of course they have. They have a strong relationship with them. This one is one where both sides, Hill and the officer, could have been like, "Hey, look, I just want to see your license and registration. Just stay there. Boom, come back. Hey, this is why we pulled you over." All right, now, I'm doing this in hindsight.
Mm-hmm.
This is why we pulled you over. Okay, a warning. You can't be weaving in and out of traffic, and in this area, you can't be going 70 miles an hour, which I believe that's what the number was. And that's okay. I mean, at that point. Just, now, Hill, on his hand, should have had the window down.
Yeah, never should
because he was told,
I agree.
2 hands on the wheel, window down. And so both sides could have. They said Hill was uncooperative with officers. They said, first, let's be clear, at no time was he ever under arrest. He was briefly detained for officer's safety after driving in a manner in which he was putting himself and others in great danger. Okay. Upon being stopped, they say Hill was not immediately cooperative with officers on the scene, who, pursuant to policy and for their immediate safety, placed him in handcuffs. They said Mr. Hill was uncooperative, refused to sit on the ground, and therefore redirected to the ground. Well, you can be redirected in a rough way. He said he escalated the situation. It would have gone by faster if Hill had complied. Well, it would have gone by faster if he hadn't dragged him out of the car.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay? To be honest with you. Yeah. I mean, so don't, let's not play. I mean, there was mediocre judgment. I'm not going to say bad, mediocre judgment on both sides. Right? And again, the police don't know what they're dealing with every single time. Total, complete respect for them. Total
Absolutely.
And complete respect. But there's also ways to handle things. Hill didn't handle it quite right. Yeah. The officer didn't handle it quite right.
Agreed.
And that's just, I mean, that's just as simple as it gets.
Yeah.
Let's see. Paul Skeens, another big, another big record for him. I think most strikeouts by a rookie in the season for the Pirates. It's just been fun to watch him pitch. He brings more people into the ballpark just when it's announced that it's his day to start. And that happens on the road as well. People want to see him. And I mean, all credit to him because he has come in as a relatively polished product. Normally, over time, the really good ones have to adjust. They got off to a great start, then they have to adjust. He's been adjusting on the fly. And Skeens struck out 9 last night. He's now 10-2. He beat Miami 3-2 last night. But, he's not only 10-2, he's 6-1 at home. He's made 20 starts. He's averaging 6 innings a start. Okay, so he's got 120 innings pitched. He struck out 151. He has a 5-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio, which is phenomenal. And in 120 innings, he's given up only 88 hits. See, we can go through all the analytics we want and this is where ESPN makes a massive mistake as to how they present baseball on TV. It's over and over again massive. Where you just sit there and it's like too much. Okay, don't overload on the analytics information they throw out there all the time. There are certain stats that are really important when I look at certain things. On-base percentage is very important to me. You got there. Okay. I know you want to hit because it helps your contract and it helps your batting average, but on-base percentage means a lot to me. Runs scored means a lot to me. Extra base hits means a lot to me. Well, in pitching, two things that I look at right away of pitchers. Innings pitched to hits given up. It's simple. I'm not looking for a number. I'm not looking for a percentage here. Do you have fewer hits given up than innings pitched? Okay, let's start with that. All right, so it's 120 to only 88. Here's the next one. What's your strikeout to walk ratio? Well, he has 151. He's walked 31. That's just about 5 to 1. All right, and for those who can multiply, 155 would be exactly 5 to 1. All right, so okay, but it's just about 5 to 1. Okay, I see that. That's phenomenal stuff to go with ERA. And this is what I tell my broadcasting class all the time, because baseball has become so heavy on analytics.
Yeah.
Right? If I'm a general manager and a manager, I want all the analytics. As a fan, you have to be able to give fans numbers that are relatable. Right? Do they know what it means? I keep going back to WAR. Everybody's like, well, you hate WAR, or you don't like modern baseball. And I sit there, and every single person I ask that says that to me, I said, okay, tell me how you calculate it.
Yeah.
Like, what? I said, batting average. I said, I know batting average. Batting average happens to be hits versus official plate appearances. I said, anybody can do that. ERA is runs to innings pitched times 9. I said, we're done. I said, QBR. How do you calculate QBR?
You betcha.
I mean, how do you calculate it?
Yep.
Where's the formula for it? Right? The quarterback rating. Right? It's a rather involved formula. It doesn't mean anything.
No.
Okay? This is what people don't understand. We do all this stuff for the fans. The fans are the most important element in this. Right. That's why I complain about kickoff times. Hey, that's about the fans. It's not about.
We're going to be there no matter what.
Jack and I are going to punch in whenever they tell us, and we're going to start at whatever time they tell us. They could tell us the day before. Okay, great, here we go. Right? But for the fan who has to plan their lives, right? You have to do things that make things easier for the fan. Conversely, when it comes to giving stats on a broadcast, you need to give them stats that the fan understands and can relate to. Okay? And that's what the analytics people don't get. The advanced analytics are great for any manager or coach to take a look at, to help them see things in a certain way. Okay? Now, it doesn't mean they're right about everything. In other words, you're 4th down and 8 at your own 8-yard line. What does analytics say?
You're punting the ball?
No.
4th and 8 at your own 8-yard line?
Analytics, I said. I did not say human coaching.
Human analytics can tell you to go for it.
Go for it.
Yeah.
They tell you to go for it no matter what.
Yeah, and that's ridiculous.
Right. Well, no, but I'm saying, I'm using that as an example, but it's an accurate example. Yeah. Okay? It's an accurate example. Yeah. That's what analytics says to do. Analytics says you should be using all 4 downs all the time. Okay. All right. Now, are there certain areas of the field where there's no question that's exactly what to do? No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt about that. And I'm completely square with that. Mm-hmm. But there's also a common sense element.
Absolutely.
So when I'm sitting there and we're doing a broadcast, I don't talk about WAR. I don't talk about QBR. Now, maybe one I should talk about a little bit is WHIP, because that's walks and hits per innings pitched. Nah, I probably should mention that. I don't usually do, but I probably do. But I also have my own way of phrasing it. When I'm talking about Skeens 120 to 88, innings pitched to hits, and then a 5 to 1 strikeout to walk ratio, 151 to 31. Okay. So, plus ERA. Those are all things that are tangible that people can relate to. He's thrown 120 innings. He's only given up 88 hits. Wow. That's easy to relate. And it's your job to easily relate elements to fans and not put together stats where people go, okay, right? Mm-hmm. And the OPS one, I hear that one all the time. No, people can't relate to it. They don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Nope.
Right? It's like, come on, you just settle down. People don't understand what WAR means. People don't understand what OPS means. People don't understand what QBR means. I mean, they see the number, they go, well, that sounds good. Mm-hmm. They're told by an announcer that's good. Okay, great. Right? But the fan, 119 yards rushing on 12 carries. Looks good to any fan.
Mm-hmm.
They can figure out right away. A lot of yards per carry.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, it's amazing how complicated the numbers are. But yet it's the fans
people try to make it.
But it's the fans that can relate to the simple numbers.
Absolutely.
Okay? Fans can relate in hockey to goals, assists, points, goals against average, and plus minus.
Yeah.
They can relate to plus minus, an easy number to calculate. Okay? Now, basketball, we talk about all the time about certain things. Now, Dick and I do talk about points per possession. We do. Defensive and offensive points per possession. But that's, when it comes to the analytics numbers, like percentage of twos made, in other words, a percentage of points a team gets from two versus a percentage a team gets from three versus free throw line. Well, that tells its own story, but that's easy for fans to relate.
Yeah.
If I'm getting 80 points per game, I'm getting 50% of my points from two, I'm getting 40 points there. If I'm only getting 22% of my points from three, I need more than that. If I'm suddenly getting, like Penn State's been like 12% of their points from the free throw line, everybody knows that's lousy. Okay, that's not a lot, right? It kind of makes you question what kind of whistle they're getting because it should be about 20%. But those are easy to calculate numbers.
Yeah.
Okay. That's why you're talking about those numbers when they come up, and we're getting like. In baseball, ESPN is so
more than any.
Number. They got a whole side graphic, and like sitting there, take that thing down and show me the game. Will you? Come on.
And the irony of it, and this includes the writers. ESPN has writers who have votes. If I'm going to say, is such and such a Hall of Famer, what's the first thing they're going to look at? How many hits the guy have? What's his batting average, lifetime?
How many home
runs did he hit?
Right.
Yeah. Or pitchers, wins, ERA.
Yep.
These are the numbers you look at when you're determining whether or not the guy's in the Hall of Fame. They don't give a rat's you-know-what about the other ones.
Right.
That's the ironic part of it all. They shove it down your throat, and the irony is what makes the player great is those simple numbers.
Well, let's go back to Mike Trout early in his career. And when Mike Trout plays, he's a terrific player.
Yeah, when he's healthy, absolutely.
I mean, he's a five tool.
Yeah.
And plays the game all out, fun to watch.
Good for the game as a whole, too. Good to the fans.
But I remember it was a year where Miguel Cabrera did something that had not been done since Carl Yastrzemski. He won the Triple Crown. Well, not only did he win and people said, well, the sabermetrics people were saying over and over again, oh, Trout's the MVP, right? Because they were going through his analytics numbers, including WAR. And my point was, because somebody called me up when we were doing the show, taking call-ins, and they said, what do you think of all this? I said, look, Miguel Cabrera won the Triple Crown, and guess what? The Tigers made the playoffs, which meant everything that he did in home runs, RBIs, and average had meaning to get his team to the postseason. Right? At the highest levels, nobody had more home runs than him. Nobody had more runs knocked in than him. No one had a higher average than him. I said, Mike Trout's a great player, but for everything he did, they finished 10 games under 500. I said, so you claim that the WAR number is wins above replacement. I said, no offense, I have two eyes. If Mike Trout's not out there and somebody else is playing center field, I said, I've already assumed he's not as good as Mike Trout. I said, I don't need a number to tell me. I already know the other guy is not as good as he is. Yeah. I said, and that's right. And if he had won the Triple Crown in an Andre Dawson sort of way, remember how the Cubs finished in last place?
Mm-hmm.
And he hit,
A-Rod,
40?
A-Rod plenty of times.
He hit 48 home runs. All right. Now you can start having debates about things like that. But when a guy wins the Triple Crown and they make the playoffs, and they make it by 1-2 games?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, the dude obviously got a lot of big hits in high-pressure situations.
Yeah.
Because if you don't get it done, you may not make it, as opposed to, gee, I hope we can win today and we'll be 9 games under 500.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes a
absolutely.
difference.
Absolutely. And there's no doubt about it. And the other thing I think is also, analytics is the first thing they look at. They just look at name a lot of times. And I think, to me, Miguel Cabrera is a player that has never gotten the credit he deserves. Guy won a World Series with the Marlins. Absolutely just as dominant as can be at the plate, and one of the best with discipline at the plate.
But he'll be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I'm just saying, so he'll get his just due.
Yeah, 500 home runs, 3,000 hits, 1,800 RBIs.
And he was really celebrated at the end of his career.
Yeah, as he
really
should
was.
As he should have been. Yeah, without a doubt. This is a guy that, you look at those numbers, I think that was prior to what's perceived as, and for good reason, lying under oath, and Rafael Palmeiro being the first that it really had those kind of numbers. Eddie Murray, Rafael Palmeiro were the first in this era, really, to have those kind of numbers. You looked at it and thought, well, that puts you in the Hall of Fame immediately. Obviously not going to be the case with Palmeiro at all, and that wasn't the case. But, yeah, with Cabrera, what he was able to do, absolutely. Beard at the plate, for sure.
All right, but I've always used that as an example because it's not taking anything away from Mike Trout.
Yeah.
Zero.
Yeah, there's
but I'm
no
talking
way.
about the relevancy of an accomplishment like that.
That hasn't been done in how many years?
But because of the accomplishment, it got his team into the playoffs. Now, it's not Trout's fault he was not surrounded by better players. That's not his fault.
No, and when he was, they still couldn't win.
But in the last 2-3 weeks of a season, every at-bat had meaning for what they needed to do, and he kept producing. On a personal level, Trout, at-bats had meaning, but in the overall scheme, they did not. Right. And that's what I was trying to impart when I talked about that.
Yeah. And I still have, and I'm okay to an extent with a guy in last place winning the MVP, but in this case, no. This guy won the Triple Crown, something that hasn't been done in years.
Right.
It's something you maybe thought you wouldn't see again in baseball. There's no way you don't give this guy the MVP.
Right. So, I mean, I've always just used that as an example. Yeah. Like, okay, analytics are great, but there's realistic stuff, tangible stuff that fans can relate to. Again, our job is to relate stuff to the fans.
Yeah.
Okay? I mean, I'll listen to a Red Sox broadcast, right? And they do a fine job. But like Will Fleming, for example, is a very good broadcaster. Mm-hmm. But he does delve into a couple of these other things. Like, what is somebody telling you to do that? No, come on, do your own broadcast, because that stuff doesn't mean something to a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah. And the ironic part of it, they always used to they taught us, growing up, the KISS philosophy. It wasn't the best analogy known to man, and it was somewhat insulting, but it's true. The old keep it simple, stupid. Absolutely. 1,000,000%. Believe it or not, that's how we were taught. It's scary, but it worked. That's the most important part of it. But
thinking of keeping it simple, I'm going to give you a few moments to talk about your 49ers here.
Oh, yeah?
Okay, I will briefly exit and be right back.
Okay, enjoy. But yeah, absolutely. Just staying on that subject momentarily, I think to me the biggest thing, and we've been lucky enough, obviously Steve a lot longer than me, to be in radio and be in media for a lengthy period of time, and I was taught at a young age to keep it simple, and that's what I always grew to, is just keeping everything simple with the stats. That is the one biggest thing for me, when I think the one thing that has really enhanced the casual fan's interest into games, especially football more than anything, is the fantasy sports. Fantasy football comes to mind. That's one of the things I think you look at, and they want to know how their guy is doing. They want to know the points that they're getting them, but they also want to know the simple stats. They don't want to know the complicated things. And obviously in baseball, that sticks out more than anything with what Steve just said, with WAR and the other analytics that, to me, don't matter as much as they are believed to. I think they're great. I think the people that work on them and spend the endless hours into them do their job and do it well. I don't think there's any question. Do they come in handy sometimes? Yes, but I think in the long term, the game is the same, and I think keeping things simple is what you do. And for football, it comes to mind immediately just because of, the stats that matter the most. Did he get in the end zone? How many yards does he have? How many yards passing does he have? Did he throw an interception? Did he fumble? All of these things stick out to me more than the analytic part of it. And that's baseball too. Baseball, I am always one to criticize the Hall of Fame because I think there's plenty of guys that should have been in the Hall of Fame a long time before they were officially in. I think there's guys that should be in the Hall of Fame that aren't right now. But I think, as I said to Steve, the biggest thing you're looking at, or should be looking at least, when you are voting that person, is the simple stats. That to me is always what I'm looking at first. And it's to every game completely. If it can be calculated easily, that's the stat that matters the most. Basketball, we haven't really talked about. It's the same. Points per game, rebounds per game, assists per game. What you do to help your team. All of those things, to me, stick out a lot more than anything that is complicated and impossible to calculate. And that's why.
Listen to you talk about the 49ers, like what?
I'll tell you. I didn't mention
drip on my forehead.
Did not mention 49ers one time. I'm still on the kick of keeping it simple.
Keep it simple.
That's right. I threw basketball in as the example too. When you're looking at the easy things that can be calculated: points per game, assists per game, rebounds per game.
Exactly.
All of those things.
And I impart all this to my broadcasting class.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I don't knock the people whose job is analytics. They have an important job, and it comes in handy. I don't knock that at all. My point is, when it comes to the complete big picture of things, you can't ignore the simplicity of things sometimes, and they do. Don't overthink.
Right. Yeah.
Especially because, and I brought this point up about a minute or so ago, the casual fan, more so than anything, is now breaking into sports a little bit more, especially football, because of fantasy football, because of gambling. They want the simple stats.
And by the way, fantasy football has brought more fans.
Sure.
Without question. No question. And I think that makes a big difference in the audience that you're seeing, as you correctly point out, the casual fan.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm also the last person on the face of the earth that could tell you exactly how fantasy football works, because I've never played it before. I don't play it. I'd have to have Kyle.
No.
Kyle could come in here. Kyle could do it. He'd be great at it.
Don't play it either, but I still think the simple stats matter the most. Hey, did he get in the end zone? How many yards did he have? How many turnovers did the defense force?
Yeah.
All of those things still, to me, come in mind quickly before everything else.
So, yeah. I couldn't tell you in a million years how fantasy football works.
No, I couldn't either.
Nope. Not even close.
I'm sure. I'm not an expert either, but I'm sure those things get you the most points. That'd be my best guess.
Right, but I don't know.
Now, there could be somebody listening and saying, look, idiot, you don't know what you're talking about, which they've said before, even before fantasy football. But now that I bring that
for goodness sakes, that was said in the hallway to you. All right. So,
but I would assume at least.
And there was a moment, even I was like, I almost rose to your defense. I'm like, okay, wait a minute.
But one would assume, at least, to me, those are what's going to get you the most points.
Yeah.
The simple stuff.
But I give credit where credit's due. It's brought more people
absolutely
to the table.
Absolutely. As much painful as it sounds, as has gambling. Not a doubt.
Oh, there's no doubt.
Not a doubt.
Oh, no.
Yeah, not a doubt. These gambling companies have done an exceptional job in bringing that casual fan in.
Yeah. So,
for the better or for worse, I'm not going to answer that question, but they've done the job of bringing them in.
Yeah. So, yeah. So now we got a bye week for Penn State. Now, I would hope during this bye week we find out the conference basketball schedule.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a couple parts to it I already know, but it's only a couple. It's only a couple parts to it. Now I realize you're trying to marry, especially with 18 schools.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to marry days of the week,
right?
Television networks, tip-off times. So I realize
second part, I think, is the biggest one.
Well, in other words,
yeah.
Am I going to put a game on BTN? Do I want it opposite a game on Fox Sports 1? I prefer not.
Right.
There are things like that you'd like to do where you can't avoid it. But at least when it does come out, and I think it's supposed to be this week. I hope.
Basketball and wrestling both have been stretched to the furthest they could possibly go a lot of times with the scheduling.
Now wrestling doesn't have to be because it's still the same 14 schools.
Yep.
The addition of the West Coast schools means zero. It's
still a month before the season, and then there it is, finally.
I mean, I know part of it is, basketball and what it's doing, and maybe to some point women's basketball, but there's no Caitlin Clark in the conference this year.
It's different.
Right, you got Juju Watkins in the conference this year.
Sure.
But you don't have Caitlin Clark, so I think that's going to change a little bit. But the men's basketball schedule, what games are going to be on CBS? What games are going to be on Peacock? What games are going to be on BTM? What games are going to be on FS1? So forth. Okay. So I understand that. So it takes longer, but right about now, because people have to start knowing to make their own plans.
Absolutely.
For Penn State, this is what I need to know. And it's always the same one over and over and over again. How many Saturday home games do they have with the students on campus? Sundays are fine, but it's still Sunday.
It's still not, No,
Saturday, there should be more games, and I'm talking about overall. I'm talking overall here. Overall, there should be more games on Saturdays for college basketball across the board because Saturdays are made for college sports, football, basketball, and so forth. You can have some Sunday games, but you should have some Sunday games, not a full slate of Sunday games, but some, where you've got two or three games on a Sunday out of the potential 9 conference games you have. The other 6 should be on Saturday. Only because Saturday is made for college sports. And that's the part that bothers me about it. Right? Is that I feel they're getting away from that, feeling like every day of the week is great for everybody. Well, no, it's not. You have to know your markets. For example, Purdue can play any day of the week and they're going to sell out, right? Doesn't mean I'm going to rip them off in their schedule. But they can play any day of the week and they're going to sell out. Illinois right now, the way they're going, they could play any day of the week and they could sell out. Now, remember 2 years ago, I pointed out that Penn State had one Saturday home game. This was 2 years ago. And they had only won the year before. So they had gone through a 20-game stretch at home where they had 2 Saturday games. That's it. But I remember going out to Iowa 2 years ago, and I'd said to Gary Dolphin and Bobby Hansen, I said, good crowd today? They says, oh, God. I said, we're probably going to sell out today. I said, oh, great. I said, how's attendance been? They said, Steve, this is the only Saturday home game we have in the Big Ten this year. I go, said, well, Penn State and Iowa. And I said, Penn State has a Saturday game. I think in this year it was with Nebraska. Said, that's the only Saturday game they have. And then Bobby said, yeah, but what about Illinois? They have none. None? Okay. Guess who had 6 Saturday home games that year? Out of 10. Michigan State.
Yeah, figured as much.
Okay. Now, one of the schedulers, and I'm not saying there's anything nefarious here, please, I'm not, but you're like, okay, hold on a second. We got a little out of kilter. One of the schedules happens to be from Michigan State, right? Now, that doesn't mean Michigan State gets moved all over the place because of who they are and they draw ratings. So that part I do understand. But it was not a great look for the conference to have them have 6 Saturday home games while Illinois had none and Penn State and Iowa had one apiece. Okay? The Penn State market, which is the smallest in the Big Ten in terms of like the immediate market, need Saturday home games. They don't need 6, but 3 is nice. You want to go Penn State 3 Saturdays, 2 Sundays, or 3 Saturdays and a Friday night and a Sunday. Great. I have no problem with that. Because you have to have the other 5 games you have to have during the middle of the week. In one form or another. You have to put together a schedule. So I'm talking about 5 weekends now. Michigan State had 6 that one time. But
yeah.
In the and that's why that's why the scheduling part of it, I've always been bugged by that part of it because there are certain places that need it more than others. Like in Nebraska's going to, I'll say this. Nebraska, no matter what, sells out.
Yep.
I mean, I have to give those people so much credit for always showing out. I don't care whether it's football or basketball, but they always show out. And I think that's to their credit as great fans. But that's what I want to see this week. Since it's a bye week for football, let's see what else there is to talk about moving forward. And at some point, they've got to get back to, they've got to get back to playing, or at least given the opportunity to play Saturday home games. On this bye week, they'll go tonight. They're going to go tomorrow. I think there's also some they're going to do on Thursday as well. But they're going to get some time off this week. And I think the timing of it, you can always debate the timing of a bye week. And I think this one's fine because you've gone through 4 weeks of training camp and 2 games. Okay, now it's a good chance to kind of take a deep breath, reassess, and then move forward from there. And plus, after going through a couple of games right out of the gate, you have the opportunity to get some guys that are bumped and bruised. Just buy them a little more time to get back and feeling great again. So, yeah. And I know a lot of people want to. I think there's some people who said, I had people after the game, and I realize this is an after-game
I was going to say, it's
so I always take that into account, that there's an after-game emotion. So I got that. He says, boy, they're going to get crushed in practice this week. That's not how it works.
That's not how it works.
Okay? That's not how it works. And that's, I think a lot of people assume how things people work, but that's not how it works. Especially today, you can't do things today the way you did them 30 years ago, even 40 years ago. You can't. And there's a reason. I mean, there are reasons for that. They've had to restructure the rules of practice in such a way because the sport has felt some heat about how practices go. You know, everything from how to handle the heat to begin with, and also how much contact you're supposed to have during course of practices. Well, that changes. So what, you want to throw them out there on a Tuesday and have a full scrimmage? Well, guess what? That has no common sense to it whatsoever. None. Why am I going to do that? It doesn't make any sense to do that. First of all, they're doing a lot of stuff during the course of a practice, but there's only X amount of hitting that you're allowed. So let's take the Big 12. I believe the Big 12 rule is you're only allowed to have contact twice a week, and the second one's the game. I'm talking about once the season starts.
Sure.
There are rules about this. So you have to be smart about what you do. Now, when it comes to the film sessions, honest, direct, I like that. That needs to be better. Okay. And that's what you do. And that's where the direct honesty comes in. The next part of direct honesty that comes in deals with, look, if your performance doesn't improve in practice, you're going to be watching more in the game than before.
Sure.
But that's where it comes into play. They're going to get killed in practice. I'm not going to get killed in practice. Okay? That's counterproductive. Okay? There are ways of doing it. Okay? And it's not 1972 anymore. Right? It's just not. For goodness sakes, Don Shula, when he took over the Miami Dolphins, now, so he leaves the Colts. He goes to the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins gave up draft picks and things like that to get him. Right? You know what he did his first training camp? 4 days. Okay? 4 days in training camp. Really? Right? Now, today, 4 days? No.
No.
No
Not a chance.
way. And it's just, I mean, that's how, okay, the game's different now. The game's different. And because, and I'm talking about the approach to the game is different. Doesn't mean that, there are a lot of things, for example, that are, are the same or whatever. But, how a coach has to go about it. And James Franklin's very open about this. He says, look, I love this game and what it means to fans, what it means to the town, what it means to the players, what it means to them getting degrees, what it can mean to the future, their future lives. I mean, a lot of things. Long list. So the most important thing to do is to save the game. And if it's going to be under external heat because of something that happens, hey, what can you do to adjust to make it more palatable, right? Now, just because of the pure volume of practices, percentage-wise, do more concussions take place in a practice? Well, yeah, because there's more practices. So you then, okay, how do we change? Well, now everybody's wearing the bubble caps. Okay, everybody's doing that. And there also are, you try to be smart about the amount of, quote, hitting you have during the course of practice. You have to have some. But not every drill is going to be like knockdown, drag out. And, for Penn State, Tuesdays and Wednesdays are work days. So there's more on those days. I remember it doesn't quite go back to the days when Joe was the head coach, and especially in the 70s and 80s and so forth, they referred to it as Bloody Tuesday. Okay. Well, there is now no coach on the planet right now that is doing Bloody Tuesday. There is no Bear Bryant at Texas A&M and the Junction Boys. That doesn't happen anymore. It doesn't happen. Right? In today's world, that doesn't fit today's world and what's needed to allow football to thrive. Now, does that mean there's certain sacrifices that come into play? Yeah, one of them is, we talk about it all the time. Usually takes 2 to 2.5 games to really get the tackling down on all levels of football. Like last night, the 49ers played the Jets. Almost all those players didn't play a preseason game.
Right.
So the first time we were out there playing a game was last night. The last time the 49ers played didn't go well. Was in February. Okay? For the Jets, it was beginning of January. But that's the last time they tackled. A game tackling.
Right.
That was what was so mystifying about Penn State on Saturday in the first half. They tackled really well against West Virginia. In the first half, they struggled tackling. In the second half, though, Penn State tackled really well. It's why Bowling Green only had 89. Well, they had 85 yards total in the second half. That was it. But that in the first half, there were more missed tackles than the West Virginia game, which was surprising. But that's one of the sacrifices that happens of the new way of doing things. Is you feel like it takes a little bit longer for tackling to happen because the tackling's happening in games. Yeah. Now, for your team, obviously you could tell the one thing that your team practiced, and that was field goals.
That's right. Hit every one of them.
So exciting. So exciting. Set the game back 20 years.
That's right.
But that's what the 49ers do. Over and over and over again. Does it bother you your team sets the sport back?
Nope, not as long as they win.
When was the last time you won?
Last night?
The whole thing.
Oh, well, yeah. 30 years, 31 years, 30 years.
It's a long time.
Yeah. Too long.
Well, now you sound bitter. Very bitter. So we will end on a bitter note.
That's right.
Because you are bitter. Now, tomorrow there's no quarterback club, so you're stuck with me tomorrow.
That's right.
Yeah. There you go.